Hey guys, in this video we're going to look at hinting and linking. Though this is quite a subtle technique, it's one of the most powerful ones you can use in mashups to make sure that your music sounds like one piece. Similar to the concept of a reverse reverb, you can grab a loop from an upcoming element and sneak it in underneath the current element to prepare the listener for the tone, energy, and rhythm of the new element. This is a hinting section. Similarly, linking is where you take a loop from the element you just transitioned out of, and then use it subtly underneath to remind the listener that it will be coming back in. That way, when the element does come back in, they feel like they're still experiencing the same song. This furthers the sense of unity and wholeness of the mashup. You don't need to do it every time, just in instances where the two tracks you're using feel a little bit too different from each other. It can also provide you with additional opportunities to add your own pickups or add extra energy in sections that need it. Let's look at an example of this. Keep in mind here, I'm actually using two songs that I wouldn't choose to put together in a mashup, but I want to show you how using two elements that are a little bit different from each other can still be brought closer together by using hinting and linking. To use a piece of the main track as a linking element in the breakdown, steal a bit of the intro or the outro. I suggest you find one single bar from the simplest section of audio you can, either in the first or last 8 bars of the song. Try to find one that doesn't have any effects on it, or your ear will notice it looping. Grab a piece from the middle of an 8-bar section rather than the very start or end. Use Ctrl-D on Windows or Command-D on Mac to quickly duplicate a clip. This simple linking loop uses a little bit of the intro from the main track to introduce some of the rhythm and energy from the main track into the breakdown. In order to make sure that it's not too noticeable, we can use a low pass and a high pass filter or any other kind of EQ to subtly carve out any parts of the sound that we don't want. In a breakdown, we generally don't want too much bottom end coming through, particularly from any kick drum. As we progress through the breakdown, we might actually want to take loops from different sections of the main track. In this case, we're going to allow the linking loop to progress to a more energetic section. This section has thicker percussion as well as a riser progressing all the way through it. Now that we're nearing the end of the breakdown, it's a good idea to see how the hinting loop is going to be able to pass its energy over back to the main track. You'll usually need to use some volume automation and filtering automation to make this nice and smooth. Leaving the end of the breakdown for now, let's go back to the beginning of the break and see if we can borrow a little section of it to create a hinting loop. As well as using a loop to join the two main track sections together, we can also use a little piece of the breakdown as a way to slowly introduce the breakdown. We can use it in the 8 bars leading up to the breakdown, or we can even use it in the intro. This little melody from the breakdown is quite catchy, and it would be good to familiarize the listener with the tone of it. However, we don't want to give away the entire melody straight away. Let's try editing it down and creating a more simple version of it. You can hear how this will introduce the feel and the tone of the melody, preparing the listener for the breakdown track without actually giving away the whole melody. We can use volume automation or filtering to slowly bring it in. This way, the listener is unlikely to realize that it's actually part of a separate piece of music. Let's try another example that you're more likely to use. In order to introduce the feel of the breakdown just before it comes in, it's often a good idea to use a hinting loop in the 8 bars leading up to the breakdown. This way, when the breakdown does actually drop in, the listener will already be used to the tonality and energy of the breakdown. It's not so much of a shock when it drops in. Don't forget to use volume automation or low-pass filtering to slowly bring it in. In this example, the change in energy was a little too sudden as the main track dropped out. This is one of the situations where it's useful to use a sample, like a big kick drop. On top of this, we can use some send automation to send a little bit of audio to one of the return tracks, in this case, a delay. We'll send a little of the main track so that it echoes out into the breakdown a little bit. Or we can try sending some to our large reverb. This example is using a little bit too much of it, and it floods the breakdown a little bit, but you can hear how it helps join the two sections together. These effects, combined with the sample and the hinting loop, make the transition from main track to break a little bit more smooth. The better your two elements fit together to begin with, the less of these tricks you'll have to use at once. So far, we've talked about hinting or linking loops as something that you use subtly to help blend one element with another and make it feel like one complete mashup. But you don't always have to be so subtle with the use of your elements. Let's go back and look at a previous mashup we were working on. In this example, we'd got a pretty good transition from the break to the main track. However, in the final section of the main track, it would be nice to occasionally drop a little bit of that vocal in, just to remind the listener about the vocal they heard in the breakdown and to make it feel like one piece of music. Rather than using another hinting or linking loop over what is already a busy track, we can chop in a little bit of the break track just for a bar or even half a bar. You can solo the piece that you want to work on and make sure that it contains only the phrase that you want. Then we can clean it up a little bit too. Once we feel like it's cleaned up enough, we can send a little bit of it to a delay so that when it quickly comes in and out, it still feels like it belongs. Next, we can solo the main track and carve out a little bit of space for it so that when it comes in, it's got plenty of room to be heard. You can do this through volume automation or filtering, or even muting the track on certain beats. In this case, a little bit of high-pass filtering should do the trick. If we wanted it to be a little bit less obvious, we could use our bass fader to pull out the presence of the main track instead. Next, we test them together and see how well it flows. There is a little bit of instrumentation creeping in behind that vocal. So depending on how much you can clean it up, you'd have to make a judgment call on whether it's more important to link the listener back to the breakdown or preserve the clarity of the track. Obviously, it's safer to do a lot more with it if you have a clean vocal, such as an actual a cappella. In the next video, we'll actually look at acapellas and some of the tricks you can use to edit it into almost its own instrument. We'll go into looping and chopping vocals, as well as how to use other drum elements in your mashup. Thanks for watching.